foreshortened sword blades, if you will. Well, throughout history, repurposing has been a common point with tooling, with materials, with a lot of different things like that. You know, a while back, quite recently, I got this corn knife that probably wasn't a sword blade, but I've had them that were made from sword blades before. So that's a rather thick spine, almost pipe back, but not quite. I have had some corn knives and machetes made from sword blades. Hold on just a second. And what I'm looking at, I'm thinking about the different types of knives and the different types of, the kind of weapons that came from sword blades. What could you use a broken sword blade for? Well, broken into short sections, that makes a pretty good hide scraper. Of course, you can make a knife for whether it's for combat or for culinary, for kitchen use, or for agricultural use. It's good steel generally. Some of it is better than others. And I did a video a while back where I took a magnet. I was forging a magnet, and I wanted to make a knife that looked like it was made from the end of a broken sword. So I have that. If you think about the Viking sacks or Anglo-Saxon sacks, if you think of a sax in general, were saxes made from broken swords? A fair amount of them were they also made, you know, essentially from the ground up, forged into a sax initially? Yes, they were. We think about a Scottish dirk, or even your shorter skene dhu. And sometimes maybe only the end of the sword broke off, and that would make for a skene dhu, or a short knife in general. But if it broke off longer, this is already pretty close to a dirk as it is. So I like to think about, you know, different knives. Were Bowie knives ever made from broken sabers? They sure were. Well, there's a reason I've decided to do this video. But before we get too far into this video, if you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to like and subscribe. Tell your friends, and be sure to wear black if you're working around a lot of dust so it shows up well on camera. When I did that video a while back, and I did the knife and the sword blade, I was quite happy with it. The sword turned out nice, decent size. I quenched it. I tempered it. Coming out of temper, I noticed there was a slight deviation on the spine. And I decided to straighten it without heating it up more. Boys and girls, don't do that, because now, as they say, inside every large knife or two smaller knives, now I have a two-piece sword. But I will say one thing, that this is quite fine grained. This was made from a magnet, and what happened was when I pulled this out of my quench, I allowed it to cool. I had it clamped. I did 2 tempering cycles. And I had more of a lump than anything right back here. And what I did was I brought this into my anvil, and I was like, it's still hot enough. I had a gloved hand, and I took a hammer and did a couple taps. And then I heard a bright metallic sound as this hit the floor. It happens, so don't do that. Now, what can I do from here? How do we change this into a knife or a dirk or a chopping implement? Well, one, let's look at what we have here. One, I have a blade with the tang. It may be cut off, it may be broken off rather, but I still have a blade here. Here I have a blade, but nothing really good to hold on to yet. There's a couple things I could do. One, I could just grind this down into a tang and leave this as the original sword blade. So essentially, think of it this way. You walk the battlefield. Maybe you're a soldier, maybe you're not. Revolutionary War time, Civil War time. You find a broken sword, or you find a sword and you already have one. You need something shorter. Either way, it gets worked down into this smaller section. You go to your local blacksmith and you say, "Hey, Smitty, I need this turned into a knife. I need a hunting knife or a knife for doing other things." How's everybody doing? Hope you're doing well. So, what I'm going to do with this end, I'm going to carefully grind this into a tang. Simplest way to turn that into a knife is to turn part of this blade into the tang. Now, I want to say my heat treat is probably good on this, but, you know, beating it, but, you know, trying to cold hammer it, it will break. We know that. I have a fine grain to this that I'm okay with, of course. So this one, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grind it into a tang. Section right here. Something I can set into a piece of natural material, like antler or bone or wood. And that's going to give me a fair sized knife right there, or whatever cutting use I need to use it for. Now this one already has a tang, and although I could possibly grind through 3/16 of an inch of hardened and tempered steel, I know one thing, that I've already got a fracture right here because I broke it for one. But I want to make sure that I don't have more fractures in the tip that I could just grind into. And trying to retain temper, I would have to do this quite slowly. And there's always a possibility that I may have fractures in this. So I'm going to cut this off, grind a little bit of radius to it, and reforge it, reheat treat. The other thing you have to look at is with the older steels, with shallow hardening steels, that this may have only been edge quenched. Now this one that I made was not, it was full quench. But in an edge quench, if you try, let's say that you run a third of the way onto this blade and that is hardened, but the rest is not, that when you grind this back, you're going to have a tip that's going to deform, it's not going to hold an edge well. Pretty simple. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and cut off my damaged portion. I'm going to radius it a little bit, and then we're going to go into the forge, which I've already got going, and I'm going to reforge that blade. And then I think it would be wise to go ahead, once I have the tip reforged, I'll go ahead and maybe cut this tang down. Maybe I can forge a striker or a small patch knife out of the remainder of the tang. I'm thinking a striker would be ideal. And, you know, we're going to look at repurposing good material that just did not quite perform the way I wanted it to. But hey, did it harden up? It sure did. Can you make a sword blade or a knife out of a bar magnet? Well, clearly I did. So, here we go. Once more, if you haven't subscribed yet, now would be a great time to do so. So first thing I'm going to do, I I'm going to take part of this off. Now, I'm not going to take the tang off yet. I'm not going to shorten it yet because one, I'm just not. Although I could, but I'm not. I'm not right now. So here we see that's cut. I'm going to sharpen a blade real quick. I forgot to yesterday. That'll work. Here we go. I'm going to switch over to a coarse belt. Rather worn 36, but it's going to do its job fine. And first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take this one. And I have a small crack right there, probably from when I tried to straighten that. I'm going to go ahead and take off some of that thin edge. And before I start forging this, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut this, going to cut it back just a little bit more. Because I don't want a potential crack to form. So I did cut that at a little bit of an angle because that's going to help with forging. Something like this could be turned into a wood chisel, a lot of different things, but we're going to make it into a knife today. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to heat that up. I'm going to let it cool just to make sure that I do, take some hardness out of that. I wouldn't want to have a hard section at the back and then soft up front. Go to forge it and have the vibration cause it to break. Now, just like on the other piece, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grind the spine here. And I think that's okay. Now, I've only got this ground to a bevel. It's not sharp. So I'm not going to worry about taking this down because I'm not forging. But what I am going to do, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to even that out. Now, would a blacksmith in older times, would he have forged that into a tang? He might have. Their heat treat wasn't very good at all, but it worked for the time period and for what they were doing. This did come in at a little bit of an angle, but it'll be okay. Examination doesn't appear to be any cracking. We could acid etch that and find out for sure. But in the meantime, that's just a little bit hotter. Not an even heat, but it's enough that it should work for what I'm doing. Now, I'm going to start on the contact wheel, and I got to determine how much of a tang do I want on this. Am I doing full tang, or rather scale tang or hidden tang? I want to do a hidden tang. I'll look here. I'm probably going to run that tang up into, kind of right up into here. I plan on putting likely an antler, or probably an antler handle on this. Likely radius that in. Okay, well, back to the grinding part. Back to the grind. Once more, if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a great time to do so. Now, it is likely that a blacksmith in centuries past probably wouldn't have taken the time to set it a grindstone to grind it down. Although it could happen. It's more likely that they would have taken that piece, heated it up, draw it out into a tang. Because means of attachment, you're probably going to do a peen tang. Or it may be set in with lead, it may be pin, or it may just be wedge pin. But with this process, one thing you have to keep in mind is this is hard steel. And you don't want your tank too hard because it's likely this could break again. And we don't want to do that. So when I get done with this, I'll clean it down and we'll do a draw temper on it. Just soften the tang out. talking about that the heat treat methods were not very, they would be subpar to what we do today. Okay? So, what would a Smith have done long, long ago in a time far, far away? How would he have heat treated this? Likely when he was done, he'd have brought it up to probably red heat and quenched it in water, maybe brine. Of course, that would be a shallow hardening steel. I'm trying to use up my old belt, so I'm just going to go through doing this here. Instead of using a new one, which I'll probably end up doing. And there may have been a draw temper, there may have been auto tempering. And I bet, did that unplug? Nope. I bet I threw a breaker. Yep. You want to make tactical katanas at times? I will, yes. Got to go in the back. I flipped a breaker. That happens at times. But, yeah, if you think about it, how would they have tempered a knife? At best, they would have ran color on it. If you're real lucky, somebody might have a vat of lead or something like that they would have used for tempering blades, but probably not real likely. Especially if that lead could better be used for things like musket rounds, you know, for bullets and things like that. Oh yeah, Axon main. Got the. Oh, I thought it had the black light on. That's just the LEDs. So anyway, try this again. The American ones generally are sold out. My Facebook information is in the description. You can find me there and contact me. There we go. Okay, so now, I mean, I can turn this into a scale thing easy enough, but I'm not going to, because I'm thinking that I could make kind of a cool forged cross guard, make it look kind of Revolutionary War era. We'll go back to grinding in just a moment. Okay, now I'm actually going to go to a bigger hammer for the next process, because that one, I was concerned if there were any cracks in it, it was going to go ahead and come apart, so it wasn't going to take much. Going to about a 3.5 pound half rounder, and bring that up to temperature again. Okay, now I don't want this pushed towards the belly, the edge of the blade. So one thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and taper my tang a little bit. Oh, that broke off. That broke off while I was grinding, so there was a crack there. Probably would hit me with a hammer. Okay, so one thing I'm going to do, I'm going to draw some temper on this, because clearly all of this is still hardened. I was cautious enough not to overheat the blade or anything, and that's evident here on the tang. We didn't have any color change. can do, I can get out my propane torch, or I can just use my forge right now. And I want to soften this tang up. One, I'm going to watch for color change. Now that's important because it indicates the oxide, the anodization, if you will, indicates change in the crystalline structure and the hardness of the steel. Now, is this what I would want to use for tempering a blade? Absolutely not, because it takes an hour or more generally to really get a thorough change from martensite to tempered martensite. And while they did that many moons ago, and there are people doing it today, there are better ways to do that. Some people will say it's better. You actually see the transition from a low red to where I am now. Where it's clear here, you know, still white, that color will actually run. I have to stop it before it gets up here. A couple ways to do that. But, you know, a lot of times the weapons of old, the tools of long ago, not so long ago really, they worked with what they had and they made it work. Why did they only harden the edge and not temper it? Well, you got a little bit of auto tempering. The steel was shallow hardening, and they didn't have a way to do real controlled heat treat. I want to try to get it kind of blue up here, and to do that I'm probably going to use a propane torch, or I could heat a piece of steel. I might heat some metal or a piece of copper in the forge and try to get it to climb. In this case, I'm going to let the heat rise, and I'm going to have to be careful about that. Because if I hit this, one, I could break the blade, and two, if I had that protruding, I can catch with my glove, but if I had that sticking out, I walk into it or someone else does, it's not very safe at all. But you can see how that temperature, how the oxide is changed as the heat essentially climbs. As it rises, heat rises. Now, a lot of that, it's not going to get onto the edge, so I'm okay leaving that right now. Let's do a little bit of hand forging. Somebody will be like, oh, you're going to have decarb. You're always going to have decarb at forging, guys. At least if it's a carbon steel, you are likely to have decarb. Now, I'm going to carefully work this down to a tip. Do I think that's what they would have done back then? No. No, I don't. I think they would have hot cut that, and they would have ground it. And then they would have done, at best, a half-ass heat treat on it. But it would have made a knife. A broken rock makes a knife. A broken bottle makes a knife. A piece of copper or copper alloy that's been pounded on coal makes a knife. So does iron. Does it make the best knife? No. No, it doesn't. But it does in turn still make a knife. Oh my. Yep, just as I suspected. Had a couple cracks open up on the spine right there. I figured that could happen. That is a possibility. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut this off again. Just like on the piece I just dropped on the floor. Oh, this one had some cracks here that it broke. This one has a couple cracks right there. I can try to work around it or grind them out, but chances are that there are some underlying structural issues. This happened back in the day when you had a tool pit. You sure did. I think I can use this. And I may still end up having to cut more of that off. While that's heating, let's look at our knife. Well, that's looking pretty good. Now there's a critical point right here at the shoulder. You can see how it's radiused in. Now that's still pretty much at a full hardness. That can change up when I go to hot fit a guard on here. If I hot fit a guard, that's going to probably soften that up some, but I do want to be cautious about it. So here's what I'm going to do. We're going back to the grinder. I'm going to take that oxide off and see about running tempers. One thing we can do, we can actually check and see how this has changed hardness on the blade. And I can do that with a file. Now here, it doesn't skate a file because it should not skate a file. It's been tempered back. If it skates a file, it's too hard. This, I can cut into the steel a little, as is the same here on the shoulder. But if I come down here, I can file a notch in. And getting progressively harder. Okay. As I said, leaving a knife or a blade in a vise like this is not safe. I'm going to go ahead and remove it. You guys want to look and see there's some notches there I filed in. So you check hardness. Let's set that to the side for now. And let's try forging again, and let's see if this, if it holds up or if it breaks. Well, that did better that time. Let's get back in the forge. And let's take this item. color. And that's coming up into that shoulder a little more. It will likely creep a bit more. We'll let it cool. All right. Trying to preserve the rest of this, so I'm being a little cautious about how I'm doing my striking here when I'm forging. And now that tip is thickening up, and I will draw that out, but not till I bring the spine and the edge to meet. Now, I have to do this cautiously. If I heat the body of the blade and change the potential, the temper on it, it's not as critical, like the body or the spine, it's not as critical as if it's a cutting edge. And this one I may actually end up putting a ricasso on, I don't know. So I'm going to start down here, I'm going to start low, and I'm going to watch my color, but you guys cannot see the color, can you? Hold on. And I'm going to wash over that area, and I'm going to heat the lower part more so, that way the heat rises. And I'm getting kind of a gold brown, kind of a dark straw color. Starting to get into that purple blue. And I'm going to let it cool. See that blue coloration there? Now if you look at the spine of the blade, you can see it got into that straw color. That should be okay. Let's put that back in the vise. All right. I wouldn't want to go set a guard onto that and have it break off. And I don't think it would, but hey, just a precautionary matter. So I'm probably a little over 1/4 inch thick on that tip. That's not where I want to be. What I do want to do is is I want to come over here to the power hammer and probably use it to draw out the thickness on that piece. Looking good so far. Okay. Now, while that's heating up, we can examine this a little more. And as I said, you can see the spectrum as that heat has migrated. And I think this is going to work okay. At least I hope it will. I'll find out. Now, to go for a period piece, I'm going to go with the forged guard. I could do poured pewter. I will likely pour pewter in the end and use that for a curing. So I will likely drill or notch the tang so the pewter will lock onto it. But in the meantime, there's my knife blade from a sword blade. And we've got one more to do. Here we are. Now, this is surprisingly higher carbon than what I expected. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to be cautious about how I do my heat treat on this. And also, which I was before, I'm also going to be cautious about how cool I let that get when hammering. I also don't want to overheat it. That's a little harder to do my gas forge. Coal forge would be a little different as well. Coal forge would be more likely to burn it. Now, it was a common point to clip saber blades at one point. Saber blades are cutlass. What's a clip point? Well, you think of a Bowie knife, how it has the up curve, where the tip rises to the spine or sometimes beyond. And why was that? Well, they considered a clip point to be sturdier than an elongated forged thin point. I've heard all kinds of stories about, oh, the clip point was called a clip point because it was resembled the front of a clipper ship. Yeah, I'm sure blacksmith that's never been on a ship knew that, you know, or some of them had been. But clip points were called clip points because they were clipped. They were cut. How do you make a clip point? Quite simple. You take a bar of steel and you create a freeform where you cut across here and across here. As you forge this, it rises. Why would you cut instead of forging all the way? I'll put that in the wrong spot. Freeform cuts were quite common when our steel was stringy. And it was more likely that you would damage your blade trying to form a tip on it, elongated and thin. Especially working at lower temperatures and doing water or brine quenches. It's often said that a good camp knife should be no less than a 1/4 inch thick of the finest steel. That's a heavy blade. But if you don't have a good heat treat, I suppose more material might make it more durable. Now I could grind my thicknesses to an equal thick, my bevels to an equal thickness, but I kind of want to forge that because that's what I'm doing here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a great time to do so. Once I get the blade the way I want it, I'm going to turn it around. I'm going to cut the tang off. I'm going to report the tang. And I will probably grind this the rest of the way. Now, come over here. Time to shorten the tang. Base this off of my palm, which is not real big. I can do a 3 3/4 inch handle, which is quite small. So let's do this at about 4. And I'm going to draw it out some, so I'm going to cut that off about 4 inches. See if I can make a striker out of that. Now, let's draw this thing out a little more. We've got quite a bit of material there. There you have a fair amount of progress on that. That's about shot. Pretty good. Grab another used belt. I'm not going for fine finish on this. I want it to look primitive. will likely get cleaned up some more, but just in the meantime, that's going to be sufficient. Now I'm going to bring that blade up to temperature, and I want to draw that tang out real quick. Okay, now my tang now kicks up. That's not where I want it. That is a lot brighter on camera than what it is in real life. We'll let that cool. Barely red. A lot of times I will water quench strikers. This one I'm going to oil quench first to try it out because that's some hard steel. Once more, if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a great time to do so. We have it. Now that is, the striker is a bit oversized. I'm going to heat it up. I'm going to let it cool. Now let it cool. And I have it was a railroad spike at one point. It never became it was going to be a railroad spike, but it got deformed. But it's good stuff. And I don't see why I shouldn't turn that into a guard. Someone try to forge a guard real quick for this knife over here. And I will be hot fitting it, and I will be using a punch to make the pass through for the tank. It'll take a moment. In the meantime, I'm going to heat that striker, and I'm going to do an oil quench, and then probably a quick dip in the water. Now I'm trying to get this to a full hardness. Ground that just to remove decarb. Now it may work or may not. Now I've got a couple others here. They're making me brittle. You can see I just broke the curlicue off that one. Well, somebody will still buy it, right? File steel. Don't remember. And then the magnet will strike. It does. going to be going over to the power hammer to draw this out, and then I'll punch it. Not planning on getting too fancy with it, but still making a decent dart. Going back to the power hammer. Draw out the other branch. I will be doing punch And then using this device, which looks like a piece of pipe that's been squished, and it definitely isn't, but I'll be using those items to fit that guard. Pretty simple process, really. Made my mark. Now I'm going to get that real hot. Railroad spikes, which that's what I'm using for this guard. It's not the hardest material, but it's durable. You wouldn't want them hard because then they would break. We'd have derailments. But you want them strong. Over here, hey, that will almost fit. I want to go ahead and heat that up again, and I'm going to stretch it out just a little bit. Then I'll work on the hot fitting. bring that up to a high heat. I'll slide that down, I'll place this over it, and hopefully evenly drive that down onto that shoulder. I'll probably end up putting a little ricasso on there. Started to make an impression there. So there's a couple things I'm going to do. It kind of gave me a ballpark idea about where it needed to go. You can see on the tang where there's that purple color, and that's essentially where the purple color was. That's going to, you know, if I touch that, that's going to be hot, but that's going to help draw the temper right there. I still want to be cautious about it because I don't want to break a blade again. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use my punch and I'm going to create a couple recesses on the side. So I'll come in here. That will make a couple of notches. This is mostly so I don't have as much side play. Once it's set, it should be good to go. I will do some like a backfill on it, I'm sure. Up here. go ahead and do a little bit of upturn. I'm going to make an S guard. Just a little bit of color on that edge. That's actually going to be okay. Well, I think I'm going to bring that curve up in the back a little bit more. Bring that front branch down a little more. I think that'll do it. All right. Well, that is that's about it while that piece cools off, which I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to dunk it in oil just to get just to kind of get that patina on there, and toss that in there. Hopefully it bakes on without burning all of the black off of it. We could go ahead and grind this real quick, just before the video's over. We're coming, hour and 40 minutes, not bad. So, sword blade, how to make a knife out of a broken sword. Here's 2 of them. Okay, so during that cleanup, I did notice that I had some little microfractures on those 90-degree corners, and those ground out. I imagine that is probably why it broke initially, was I did not round that back, and being as tight grained as what it is and fine grained, that was probably had something to do with it. So I went ahead and I radiused the spine on that. This looks pretty clean, so I don't know, there was a factor there, but I will likely go ahead and radius that spine as well. Here is the here's the guard for this blade. Turned out okay. Give it a quick flash right there. And I'm not oil quenching to harden this. I'm just doing that to kind of create a black oxide layer. Now this knife will have to be quenched and tempered again, of course. But I think that's going to make for a cool piece. And it's amazing how things can start life as one, you know, as one thing and then turn into something else. This started as a U-shaped bar magnet. You know, bars aren't U, but you know, that's what it was. So sometimes type of steel before that turned into the magnet, magnetized, lost a majority of its magnetism over time, and then I took it and spark tested it, forged it into a sword, broke the blade, not intentionally, but I did. And now that has become 2 knife blades. This one will soon be a knife blade once it's heat treated, and a striker. Guys, be sure to check out some of the other videos. Check out links in the description to Turtle Island, Iron Mountain Metalcraft, our Etsy store, and so forth. Find us on social media. Be sure to like and subscribe. We'll catch you a bit later.